It's Tuesday, September 3rd. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast. It is a hell of a day to talk ball because it's September, which felt weird to say. September, week one is right on the horizon. So truly, it is a hell of a day to talk ball because we are almost there. Real games are almost happening. And joining me to talk a little ball today is the one and only Andy Behrens. Andy, what's going on, buddy?
Yeah, we're in it. This is week one. I just ranked players, like not for draft purposes, but for week one, like looking at real matchups. It's crazy times. It's here. It's actually here.
Well, good for you little show off for getting your homework done early. I will certainly not be doing that, ranking players for week one at any time until if I have to do it. I'm still fighting to not rank players in season. I don't know if I should say that on the podcast. Maybe I get in trouble for saying this from Jason Klobaka, but
that's a good fight. That's noble. I understand.
Yeah, indeed. So if you see my rankings on the website, just know that I lost. I lost the fight, but regardless of whether I end up doing in-season rankings or not, I guarantee you, if I do them, they will be done at the very last minute possible for week one. So again, shout out to you, Andy Behrens, for getting your homework done early. We're ranking players, or at least Andy's already ranking players, because like I said, week one is here. And with that, we can finally reveal our podcast calendar for the season. And I'm so excited to share that with you. So here's how each week is going to roll. Coming to your feeds every Monday morning, Andy Behrens and I will recap all of Sunday's action. We're going to tell you what you need to care about the most, what you need to care about a little, and what you can let fade from your memory very quickly every weekend of the NFL. We're also going to maybe have some weekly fantasy awards to give out. Very exciting stuff. I'm going to also open that show every week with a care don't care monologue about the Sunday night game because Andy has very strict rules about his bedtime. So I will be doing that monologue off the top, which should be pretty fun, but great to have Andy on the Sunday recap. Then on Tuesday, Panic Meter is back with Dalton Del Don joining me to go over your submissions for the Panic Meter. Pretty great stuff. Andy was awesome at that last year, but he asked off the episode specifically because you guys buried him with your Lamar Jackson panic last year, so we couldn't have him do that this year. It was way too much. So we said, let's get Dalton Del Don suffering this year on that. We're also going to have a new twist to the end of the show to help you get the most out of the waiver wire every single week. Looking forward to Dalton joining for that show. On Wednesday, we have a brand new show with our very own Sal Vetri, Data Dump Wednesdays, where we share the most important stats you need to know from the past week of action and how these data points will help you the following week. And then on Thursday, oh man, what an electric show. Nate Tice joins me for the Fantasy Film Room as we sink our teeth into the biggest X's and O's trends on the field and examine if they're one-week wonders or sustainable trends that we can bank on for fantasy purposes. We're also going to share one prop bet you need to look at. I must say, just look at it. You just look at it. What you do after that is of your own free will, and you suffer the consequences. One prop bet you should take a look at for every Thursday night football game. And then Fridays, Andy Behrens 2 times a week. What is this? Andy Behrens and Tara Roberts.
How did I allow this to happen? Yeah.
I don't know, man. But I mean, as somebody that pods 5 days a week, I have no sympathy for you. So, but I'm very happy that both you and Tara Roberts are going to join me to get ready for the weekend of NFL action. Andy and I will look at the biggest fantasy storylines, take a macro view of it, heading into the biggest matchups. And then Tara and I are going to look at, take a micro view, players that could make or break your fantasy lineups every single week. So Andy, this pod calendar, baby, you're on it twice. What are your initial thoughts? I'll tell you that my initial thoughts are this is going to be the best season of the show yet to date.
Yeah, there's no way the people are excited for 2 days of Behrens. There's no way they asked for it. Aside from that, I think it's a great collection of shows, and it's a bunch of people who come at the NFL in different ways from different perspectives. I am, no disrespect intended to any of the other shows. I'm really excited for the Nate Tice experience. I think Nate's great. And man, the piece he just wrote on the Coach Spags defense in Kansas City and how that provides answers to all sorts of complicated problems, like really good stuff. Nate has a great way of not just giving you, you can watch a lot of like film review shows that will give you like highly specific, play specific, jargon heavy breakdowns of like individual moments. Nate does such a good job of putting it within the context of like a general philosophy. Nate's just really, really good at this, and can give you big picture and small picture while he's doing it. So I am particularly excited about that show, but the whole schedule is great.
Yeah, I'm very excited for that Nate Tice show. And of course, we'll be kind of cross-pollinating a little bit with Football 301, the show that I'm also a part of with him. So we're going to try not to step on each other's toes with the shows. We're going to try to get a bunch of different topics, right? Maybe some continuations of conversations, but multiple different topics. And I can't agree with you more, Andy. The whole goal of this calendar was to do what I love to do, which is give the listener, the viewer, whatever, multiple different perspectives on the game. I love that everybody here approaches fantasy and approaches football in very different ways. Like the way that I talk about football is very different than the way Tara or Dalton talks about the game. Everybody on the list here, the way Sal is going to bring you analysis is going to be very different than Andy or Nate. So I think, however, because I said this when we did our compilation show last week about, when I was talking about running backs, my final piece of advice, I want to present you information, and then you guys out there, you listeners, make the decisions, right? Because this is your fantasy team. This is your journey. You shouldn't be here like, oh, I can't wait to get I hate the idea of like, give me the answers to the tests. Like, I don't really view that as what we do as fantasy analysts. It's why I hate the word fantasy expert, right? Because you guys listen to this show, you watch the games, you consume information. We certainly do it more, right? I mean, we have no lives. You guys hopefully have a life. Andy has a bedtime, apparently. Apparently, Andy has a bedtime, but he has 2 shows a week, so he has less of a life than he did last year. We don't have lives. You have lives, so we give you the information that you don't necessarily have or don't have the time to access, and then hopefully, you come along the ride and you make decisions along the way. So I'm very excited about this show. I think it's totally going to give that's the goal, what I just laid out, and I think that's what we're going to get. I do just want to say before we move on and take a break here, I just want to give a shout out to both Austin Eckler and Scott Pianowski, who Austin is not coming. Eckler's Edge is obviously not coming back this year, as I mentioned in the rundown there. That episode is obviously absent. It was great working with Austin the last couple of years, and I think we had a really good show. And I'm gonna miss doing it with him, but guy's working for he's with the Commanders now. You know what I'm saying? Like he's gonna be busy. Okay, he's gonna have to do a lot of pass protecting for Jaden Daniels behind that offensive line. He doesn't have time to be on Eckler's Edge. I'm being facetious about all of what I just said. So shout out to Austin. He was a great teammate for the last couple of years, and I'm going to miss doing the show with him, of course. And Scott is doing a ton of heavy lifting on our newsletter, which everybody should be subscribed to. Andy's also doing work there. So Scott he's the man, and I will go ahead and bold prediction this right now. Scott will be on the show in some form or fashion at different points during the calendar year and obviously in the offseason going forward. So you're not losing Scott Pianowski in any way, which is great because Scott is, I think if you listen to this show and you hear my conversations with Scott, I think you know how much I truly like Scott as a friend. I love Scott and I love his perspective on sports and football and life. So, okay, I've talked enough. Did want to give a shout out to those 2 guys in addition to unveiling the entire calendar here. With that being said, while the rest of the shows this week fully dive into week 1 coverage, today's pod is going to essentially be our season preview pod. So Andy and I have 5 bold predictions for this season. And of course, it's a secret list. Let's get into it after the break. All right, Andy. We've got bold predictions. You've got 5. I've got 5. An even number of 10. What a beautiful thing there. Let's get it started with let's go with our most boring bold prediction to start. I know you said you have one boring one. So let's start with that, and I will let you go first here. Yeah, since I bagged on you so hard about your bedtime and your schedule, I'll let you go first. That would be the nice thing to do.
Oh, yeah, man. How do you not maintain a bedtime? Come on, like a firm,
I do. I also take a huge L during... I take a huge L during football season because I moved back to the stupid East Coast. I don't know what the hell I was thinking about that. So That's a conversation for another time.
I'm very old, and at a certain point in the evening, the nurse just has to put me to bed. Like that's
Fair
just
enough.
the house rules. Yeah, I was looking at the bold predictions that I wrote down, and one of them is one of them's probably going to happen, and it's not that bold. And maybe I should have gone with a higher number of players, but here it is. I'll start with the most boring one, and that is that 2 rookie quarterbacks finish among the position's top 10 scorers. Why is it somewhat bold? Well, this almost never happens, right? Like this would be a historic outlier. This happened in 2012. This was the Andrew Luck, RG3 year, but it doesn't happen a lot. We had great rookie performance. Like CJ Stroud was great last year, didn't finish inside the position's overall top 10. It's hard. But I think the profiles that we have for both Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels, man, like a couple of veterans get hurt. These guys are definitely going to finish as top 10 fantasy quarterbacks. They just need to stay healthy. I've talked about Caleb to death. He's just got an incredible supporting cast, and he's a smart, opportunistic runner. So you can see the path there to like 300 rushing yards and 5 or 6 touchdowns. And then, you probably heard Dalton rave about Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels is really fun. And he's got weapons, and he's got elite rushing upside. He's exactly the sort of quarterback who, even when you don't think he's playing well, ends up having a fantastic fantasy day. So these two just need to give us 15 or 16 games each, and I think they can both slide into the top 10 pretty comfortably. A bolder prediction would have put 3 rookie quarterbacks inside the top 10 or top 12. I guess if you squint a little bit, you can see the profile with Bo Nix, but I couldn't bring myself to actually argue it.
Yeah, that would have been too bold for me. I don't know. You're saying this is a boring, bold prediction, or this is definitely going to happen. I think that would be pretty shocking, just because, not any disrespect to those two guys. Obviously, those two guys are good players, but it's just, there are a lot of good quarterbacks that can give you fantasy success this year. I mean, who are they bumping out, right? Are they bumping out both Joe Burrow and, Jordan Love? I mean, ADP right now actually has this as Jaden Daniels QB 11 on Yahoo and Caleb Williams is QB 13. So you're right. I guess in that way, it's not that's
That's
bold,
why I didn't think it was that bold. It's pretty close to the way I rank it. This isn't some like wild, reckless thing, and it's pretty close to consensus ranks. It just happens to be something that's historically fairly rare.
I will say this. I have a Bears bold prediction, which I bet you could guess in a second what my bold prediction for the Bears is going to be when we get there. So I actually, weirdly, even though I rank it this way, I don't rank it this way, I'm actually weirdly just feeling better about Caleb Williams and the Bears right now, and just him as let me say this, as a fantasy quarterback, I've started to feel better about Caleb Williams over the last month than I have Jaden Daniels, even though I do have Jaden Daniels ranked higher just because of the rushing upside. Mm-hmm. But I will say this, Andy, and then we'll move on. And you can tell me if this is crazy, but like the more I've thought about the Commanders, the more concerned I get for Jaden Daniels. We were just, Nate Tice and I were just talking about this last week when we were prepping our NFC win predictions podcast. And, we start talking about the Commanders, and it's like, well, their receiver room probably got worse trading away Jahan Dotson. And now it's Terry McLaurin, who I love Terry McLaurin, but I do think he took a slight step back last year as an individual player. He's also like a sneaky older guy. So maybe that just is what it is. I don't love the way he's going to be deployed in Cliff Kingsbury's offense. And then after him, it's just, it is a gruesome cast of characters for wide receiver 2. Like it's Zach Ertz probably going to catch 12 passes for 40 yards in week 1 because Todd Bowles is going to blitz the hell out of Jaden Daniels. Oh, by the way, don't worry. They have probably the worst offensive line in the league. We really are counting on him to just fall ass backwards into a fantasy QB1 finish because he can run the ball, which really it is all it takes because the position is so boring in terms of the way it's scored now in fantasy. But still, I am concerned about the ceiling overall for this offense just after what we've seen here.
Yeah, no, it's really fair. And concerns about Kingsbury are really fair as well,
right?
And what exactly we're going to see from, like, I don't know, I can dream up a scenario where Terry McLaurin is a movable chess piece, and we get this sort of usage and target total that we've always wanted for Terry, but I don't think that's going to happen, right? Right? Like I don't think that's really out there for him. I don't know that everything that they've shown in the preseason is exactly what it's going to look like in the regular season. It probably isn't, but it's been a little bit of a warning of what we might reasonably expect from this offense. And I just think he's the sort of player, though, where, man, just get us to 15 games. You get us to 15 games and you stay healthy. There's no way that the rushing stats aren't going to cover up quite a bit. And I feel, I don't know if this is where you're going on Caleb, but I shouldn't feel this way about a rookie quarterback, but I actually feel like he's got a decent floor. I just can't imagine the scenario where Caleb face plants. Supporting cast is just too good. It would have to involve, 3 injuries, like some crazy sequence of injuries that, is just not foreseeable or predictable. I mean, I just think he's already mature enough, already in command enough. And I don't know, maybe this is me drinking the Hard Knocks Kool-Aid, but the vibes have been very good, and they've been very good from like some local media members who in the past have been very good about telling you when things are not all that rosy, right? Like some of the people who were most honest about what it really looked like for Justin Fields last year are saying really good things about Caleb in this camp. And I don't know, it's terrible. I shouldn't put it out there in the world as a Bears fan, but I'm feeling very optimistic about it. I don't know that translates into some huge win total. I'm not saying that. It's just been so long since we've seen competent quarterback play, and I think that's on the way.
Well, we'll put a pin in the Bears because, like I said, we'll come back to them in a little bit with one of my bold predictions. But I just hope that we don't have to like play that audio in week 5 when you're saying I'm pretty optimistic. It comes back to bite you. Okay. All right. Let's move on to my boring first bold prediction, which this is boring because this player has quite literally done this before. But I think Josh Jacobs is going to lead the NFL in rushing this year. He's he's running back 12 right now in ADP, 33rd overall. It's funny because my journey with Josh Jacobs when he signed with the Packers was immediately I was super excited by the signing. And then, just over the course of kind of looking at the contract and some of the funny money in it. And then, they bring back AJ Dillon, they draft Marshawn Lloyd. I'm kind of like getting a little lower on Jacobs. I've always been excited about the passing game. And initially when he signed with the Packers, did Josh Jacobs, I was kind of thinking, okay, I can't really pick which receiver is really going to be the breakout guy here. But I want exposure to the Packers. Why not just take the running back of an offense I'm really excited about? He's probably going to score a lot of touchdowns and be an efficient rusher. And I've kind of almost come all the way back around to that take here, Andy, just because the reasons we were sort of down on Josh Jacobs, and we were down on Josh Jacobs at some points were, number one, the presence of those 2 other backs in Lloyd and Dillon. And then the second was just Matt LaFleur's history as a coordinator, or play caller wanting to platoon his backs. I almost always want to fade that second assumption that, because this guy has done this before, he will always do it this way. Even sometimes as he's saying it in press conferences, like, we love to platoon our backs, whatever. Like, okay, you can platoon your backs all you want until it's Josh Jacobs and nobody else, right? Because AJ Dillon's on IR, his season's over. Marshawn Lloyd has been banged up this offseason. I just feel like Jacobs is actually going to just get a ton of opportunity here of late. I've moved him up to the second tier of running backs, and a player I'm actually now really excited to draft if I can get him in that sort of RB1 tier. I know you've always been a big Josh Jacobs guy, so I don't think you're going to have a lot of pushback here, but it is certainly my most boring bold prediction just because he has done this before.
Yeah, he's since his rookie year, he's been one of my favorite players. Just a absolute joy to watch. I find it really weird when so many folks have been trying to get rid of Josh Jacobs for like, I don't know, it goes back to him playing in the Hall of Fame game, I guess, right? Like we've been so ready to bury Josh Jacobs for so long. And every year he finishes among the missed tackles leaders, the yards after contact. Like he's good at all. Mm-hmm. I think part of the problem with Josh Jacobs and his perception is some of his best runs as a Raider were plays where he miraculously managed to get like 3 or 4 yards, right? And it could have easily been a 1-yard loss, could have gone for no gain. And Josh Jacobs makes 2 people miss on his way to an otherwise unremarkable run. He's been the master of that since he came into the league. And The 1 year that he really popped, it was great to see. But that's always been within his range of outcomes. And now, even if you are worried about this backfield being cluttered in some way, it has become suddenly uncluttered, and there is no one who seems like they're going to be any kind of obstacle for Jacobs whatsoever. So I love this call. This can definitely happen. As you say, it has happened. He does need to be a little bit healthier than he was last year, but no obvious concerns present from camp or the preseason. So this one is very much in play.
All right, give me your second bold prediction. We'll try to go like spicier, save our spiciest for our final two or so, like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, this one's not super spicy, but I don't see a lot of it out there, so I'll just throw it out there. I think Kyler Murray can finish as the overall QB1. I think he's probably the last guy in the quarterback ranks of whom you can reasonably say that. But Kyler already has a QB3 season on his resume. It was kind of a mixed bag for him as a passer last year, coming back from the injury. 6.7 yards per attempt, not great. But man, his best season, again, he finished as the overall QB3. He was like near 8 yards per pass attempt. When we've seen him in the past with even a decent receiving core, like the veteran version of DeAndre Hopkins and Christian Kirk, man, he was fantastic with that group. The underlying numbers were really great. Obviously, his ability as a rusher puts him in that QB1 conversation. I just feel like a lot of the arguments that I see on behalf of Anthony Richardson should apply to Kyler Murray, and he's more proven. He's actually done it. He's been a top 3 guy at this spot. I think he can get to number 1.
I love this call. You mentioned last year wasn't perfect in his return for Kyler Murray, but the final 3 games were really good. 108.3 passer rating, 6 touchdowns, 1 pick, 71% completion rate, 8.07 adjusted yards per attempt. Like just on paper, and that was against the Bears, the Eagles, and the Seahawks. The Eagles and Seahawks did not have a very good defense, but the Bears certainly had a good defense there by the end of the season, and that was not like with a great supporting cast around him there. This year, I think he does have a very, very good supporting cast, at least in terms of the pass catchers here. Like just dropping Marvin, like taking Marquise Brown out of the mix, and subbing in Greg Dortch fully for Rondale Moore, I think is just such a huge upgrade here. Harrison's a stud. I think he's going to be great. Michael Wilson was better as a rookie than people think. He's one of my favorite kind of deeper sleepers of this season. And Trey McBride, I always come back to this note. I'm sure I've said it on the podcast 100 times. I can never get out of my head Greg Olsen talking, I think on the Texans-Cardinals broadcast late in the season, talking about how Kyler Murray and Jonathan Gannon were both encouraging Trey McBride to improv on his routes like Travis Kelce, just get open, because they thought he was that good. That's how good they think Trey McBride is. I think we should be excited about this Cardinals offense. I think we should be excited about Kyler Murray. And this is a guy who's facilitated a top 5 receiver finish before. DeAndre Hopkins was the wide receiver 5 overall in 2020, his first year with the team. So if you're Kyler Murray shouldn't be used as a negative when you're projecting Marvin Harrison for immediate success or any of these guys. So obviously, again, it's a little bit of a projection. He's got to get back to his pre-injury form. I think it's a well-designed offense. I'm high on Drew Petzing. So there's a lot that needs to come together here, but I'm with you that Kyler Murray can finish as a QB1. It's at least, Andy, I would say it's at least within his range of outcomes.
Yeah, and I don't know that he was exactly the rusher last year that he had been in his peak season fantasy wise, but if you prorate that out over a full year, it's still a hell of a rushing line, and it's better than we get from most quarterbacks. And if he just settles in as somebody who's going to give us 600 rushing yards and 5 or 6 touchdowns, that's a huge boost.
Yeah, 44 rush attempts for 244 yards from week 10 on. That's pretty good in terms of fantasy quarterbacks. You can tell I had Kyler Murray's game log up for a Marvin Harrison Jr. piece I was writing earlier. Okay. My second bold prediction. This one's, I don't think this is one of my spicier ones, but again, I'm trying to save my spicier ones for later. I think Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to lead the Seahawks in catches and yards this season. This is a take I've been saying for a while that I'm trying to get myself to believe. And I've gotten there. Okay. So here we are. I love DK Metcalf as a player, and I've been maybe Tyler Lockett's biggest fan for a long time, but I want to admit just sort of the reality of those two guys as players right now. And I think, by the way, both those guys are still good NFL receivers. Lockett, I do think, has started to decline a little bit. It's not surprising. He's a receiver who's had a ton of injuries. He's a smaller guy who relies on speed and separation ability. I think that's just ticked down a little bit from him. I don't think he's washed or anything like that, but I just think he's gone from, to me, like a superstar receiver to maybe just like useful starter. So there's some opportunity there for JSN to jump Lockett. That's actually just been assumed in ADP pretty much all off season, certainly as the process has gone on. The DK Metcalf thing, I think, is a little more interesting. Again, I'm a huge appreciator of DK Metcalf's game. Long time been a fan of his separation ability, even if his route running and technique is not always the best. He can win against press and man coverage off the line of scrimmage because he's so physical. But I do think he's a guy that maybe has topped out as not a superstar, certainly not an elite NFL receiver, but a very, very, very good, like one of the best starting X receivers in the league. I just wonder if we've seen the best of DK Metcalf. That's a really great player. That's not anything like, shameful. It's just we might be at the peak of him as a player. And so that brings me to JSN, who's a guy that I think had a much better rookie season on film than he showed in the stat sheet. Any type of per route, per target, whatever metric. The guy's competing with two really good players last year. Of course, the per route metrics aren't going to be the same as some other guy who's competing with nobody or is not playing like in a ton of 11 personnel packages, whatever. So I'm not holding that against him. I think as a player, he looks like a great intermediate route runner. I think that's going to be critical in Ryan Grubb's system. He's been one of my favorite breakout candidates this year, and I do think he's going to lead this team in catches and yards.
I will say that I don't think I can afford for this to happen. I have a lot of DK Metcalf. I am somebody who believes there's probably one more level to DK Metcalf that we haven't unlocked just yet. And a little bit of volume would go a long way for him. But I am generally excited about the Seattle offense. And there's no question that there was one or two plays each week over the back half of last season where I thought you could really see it with JSN. Yeah. And it wasn't necessarily present early in the year, which is fine. He's a rookie receiver and we shouldn't have Odell Beckham expectations of every rookie receiver. But I thought by the end of the year, he popped like once every game. And it is really easy to imagine this being the case. I also, if you didn't say it, I was going to point out that for you, of all people, to say that, this third guy could be the most valuable Seattle receiver is quite a statement, because nobody was on Tyler Lockett Island earlier than you. No one stayed longer than you. And this is quite a statement coming from Matt Harmon.
Yeah, it got very lonely on Tyler Lockett Island, probably from like late 2016, 2017, really 2018 is when those stocks finally started to rise. And I finally was like, okay, thank God we held on to this investment, baby. So yeah, but look, the end comes for all players. Like I said, I think Lockett is still a useful NFL player. I think he's still, like, in terms of if he's your third receiver, that's a hell of a lot better than most teams' third receivers, even this version of Tyler Lockett. But I've definitely learned over the course of time to not hang on too long to some of my particular favorite pet players. But okay, Andy, let's move on to your third bold prediction. Okay,
my third, I think, is pretty bold, and it's also just one that I'm sort of rooting for. It would require 3 players with pretty significant injury histories to all stay healthy. So maybe this is a low probability situation. But how about Matthew Stafford leading the NFL in passing yards and challenging for 5,000 yards? I would love for this to happen. Somehow Matthew Stafford has never led the NFL in passing yards, which is wild, since he's going to hit 60,000 this year. He has a 5,000 yard season on his resume, as well as I think a couple of other like 4,800 yard seasons. He's clearly been great. The way that guy played last year, and if he'd played all 17 games, he finishes around 4,500 yards. He would have been very close to Tua anyway. He could have led the league last year. The way the ball came out of his hand last year was just vintage stuff. And at least speaking for myself, I was really worried about his ability to stay healthy and his ability to ever be like the vintage version of Matthew Stafford. Again, after we had elbow concerns, we had all sorts of injury concerns last year, and the Rams kept telling us that Stafford looked great, was great. Beat writers kept saying it, and I didn't really listen to it. And then, week 1, he was freaking awesome. He was dealing. So I just thought he looked fantastic last year. If we actually get mostly healthy seasons from Puka Nacua, from Cooper Kupp. Man, that's like 3,000 yards right there. Then I just need the supporting receivers to do almost anything. I kind of like Tutu Atwell a little bit. We get a little bit from the running backs, and pretty soon we're at 4,800 yards.
He was third in passing yards in his first season with the Rams, but he was 11th last year, sub 4,000. Obviously, he did miss some time, but still, that's worth noting that would be a pretty significant jump. I don't know, man. I have gotten more nervous about the Rams than hopeful as August wore on. Mostly just because, one, I mean, you look at their defense, which by the way actually might help your prediction here. If their defense
it was like a
mess,
middle of the pack defense with Aaron Donald. Come on,
right? I heard Greg Rosenthal point this out from NFL Network, where he said that they just traded Ernest Jones for like nothing, a little pick swap, right? And that might not have been headline news or anything, but as Greg pointed out, when Aaron Donald retired, he said to Ernest Jones, like, "This is your defense now." And then that guy's just not on the roster. I think that just goes to show you that their defense, again, is in transition. They lost their coordinator, Raheem Morris, to a head coaching job. And that's the side of the ball we shouldn't feel optimistic about. And then we look at the offense. It's just like, I hate to do just injury analysis because who the hell knows, but quite literally all of the main players on this offense have huge injury questions. I mean, Stafford is an injury risk. Kupp is an injury risk. Puka Nacua was hurt this offseason and fell in the draft because of injuries. Kyron Williams is an injury risk, right? I mean, and then the offensive line was banged up at times during camp, and it's not as if we have recent evidence of Rams offensive line injuries sinking an entire season. So I've gotten a little more nervous than positive on the Rams, but if they stay healthy, this prediction is certainly within range, especially if the defense is not good again this year.
Yeah, I'm kind of out over my skis here. I see one note about Puka returning to the practice field, and I'm like, okay, I'm all in on the Rams offense again. But I've just found it so easy to root for Stafford late in his career, and he was just such a revelation to me last year after I had such low expectations. There aren't five quarterbacks in the game who can make some of the absolutely absurd throws that he can. He's in that sweet spot of a career too, where like there's nothing else you can teach him. He's kind of seen it all, and he reacts to it all really quickly. And he's probably in the final couple of years where he's still got that just weapons grade arm. I hope we get healthy Matt Stafford for like 2 more seasons. If we do, that guy's going to finish his career with like 75,000 yards. I mean, hell of a career. I don't know that he's put himself in the Pro Football Hall of Fame yet, but he's not out of it.
Yeah, no, he's definitely within range if he can have a couple of really good seasons here to finish, which is certainly possible. All my kind of worries laid out there, the upside case for the Rams is very present, and you laid a lot of the good reasons out there. I couldn't quite decide which my next one was more bold than the other, but I think that this Bears one that I have is not that bold anymore. Well, I'm going to make it bold because I'm going to say that Rome Odunze is going to lead the Bears in fantasy points at the wide receiver position. That it's no longer really a bold take to say Rome Odunze is going to be better than Keenan Allen, because ADP has got it at wide receiver 35 for Keenan Allen and wide receiver 38 for Rome Odunze. Rome has certainly creeped up. I've heard you talk about this as well. I mean, we talked about this in person when we saw each other for 2 seconds because of everything going on with my personal life in August. But we talked a lot about Rome Odunze and Keenan Allen and sort of that dynamic there. And I just think, look, all respect to Keenan Allen, I think he's a very much like Tyler Lockett. I think he's a declining player, but still, like, if he's your third receiver, that's a hell of a lot better than most third receivers in the league. I think he's going to hold an important role for this Bears offense, but I think it will be more in a supporting role. Whereas I just think the longer that Rome plays, the more they're going to want to involve him, the more they're going to want to put on his plate. And DJ Moore's the bold part about this is saying that he's going to be better than DJ Moore.
Yes.
Like, that's the bold part, because DJ Moore is freaking awesome. He was so good last year with the Bears. I think he played at a level of like a top 12-ish NFL receiver. So asking Rome Odunze to come in and be better than that guy is a lot to ask, but I have a lot of faith in Rome Odunze as a prospect, who was my second receiver in this class. The ADP gap between, Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, and then all the way down to Rome Odunze at wide receiver 38 is just not commensurate with their ability as prospects. It's just obviously a deference to Marvin Harrison being the top receiver on an offense that should be with a pretty good quarterback, and then Malik Neighbors is just going to moonwalk into a boatload of targets, whereas Rome, playing the rookie quarterback, got a target Crowdetry here in Chicago, but I just think that Cream ultimately rises to the top. I feel pretty confident in having him ranked as the second Bears receiver, which I've had all offseason. The bold prediction here is just that he's going to lead the team in fantasy points at the wide receiver position, which I don't even think means that DJ Moore was bad. I just think that it means that Rome Odunze led the team in touchdowns, which I think is possible considering what we talked about in August was that Caleb wants to go to Rome in these the scramble drills and off script stuff.
I worry that I read too much into that, but it feels so real. Every time anything goes a little bit off script, it feels like Caleb is just searching downfield for Rome, and it's worked, right? It works consistently, and I think there's just a non-trivial chance that that Rome is just a screen. He looked the part in college, that he's just a screaming talent that is going to force his way into more targets than anybody's projecting for him. I think a couple things that I'm thinking about that you voiced there. One of them, the gap between him and Malik Neighbors. Malik Neighbors is so difficult for me because that's another player where I think the world of his talent, but that could just mean, a Garrett Wilson type season where he manages through sheer volume to overcome possibly horrendous quarterback play and put together 1,000 yards and not much of anything else. And I think Rome can top that. I think the best case scenario for Rome Odunze is maybe a top 10 fantasy season. However, I also think that the fantasy industry to some extent has soured a little bit on DJ Moore, which is weird. And I get it at some level. This is, a deep group of receivers, and it had not previously been a deep group of receivers. He was the clear number one, unrivaled number one. And yet this is also probably the best passer that DJ Moore has ever worked with. And so maybe
low bar, but still true.
Yeah, really low bar. But he's coming off a great season with somebody who was just sort of verifiably not an upper echelon NFL passer by any means. And I don't see why he can't run that back with Caleb Williams and just a much bigger pie available to everyone else. I feel like if you came into the offseason, you had DJ Moore as your wide receiver 10 or 12, and then, the Allen thing happens and they drafted Dunze, and then you dropped him to wide receiver 20, that's probably too far because he's just never worked with a great NFL quarterback. That hasn't happened yet. He was snake bit in college too. that was a rogues gallery at Maryland too. We've just never seen what it looks like when DJ Moore is tied to an upper tier passer. And I'm not guaranteeing by any means that Caleb Williams in year one is going to be that, but I do think there's a really good chance it's the best pro passer he's ever worked with. He could at the very least do what he did last year, if not top it.
Totally. Yeah, that's the part that makes me the most nervous about this prediction, which is why it's pretty spicy, but we'll see if my next two, well, I know my last one's spicy, but if my next one's spicier than this Bears one. But let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to reveal our final two bold predictions apiece. And again, I'm hoping they're pretty spicy. Let's get into it right after this. All right, Andy, give me your second to last bold prediction for the 2024 NFL season.
This one feels spicy because I certainly don't have it ranked this way. I don't have it ranked anywhere close to this. But I have written this guy up as a sleeper, a league winner, all the bad fantasy terms I've applied to this guy. Jalen Wright, top 10 fantasy running back.
Man.
This clearly requires, I'm not going to say it. This doesn't require 2 injuries. This requires 1 injury somewhere. This requires, I'm not wishing it on anybody, but anything happens to Achane or Mostert, Jalen Wright's going to play a lot. We just saw Miami's offense deliver 2 sort of league tilting fantasy backs. And again, Achane wasn't exactly the same after the mid-year injury, but he was still really good. Before the injury, he was crazy good. And while he was crazy good, Raheem Mostert was also crazy good. Raheem Mostert was carrying you into the playoffs. So we know it's a rich environment for a running back. Man, Wright has looked really good in the preseason. He was 7.5 yards per carry in the SEC last year. A very good player. He's got, like every other Miami skill player, he's got crazy speed. I think this is a real talent who has a shot probably to begin the season. He's just a cameo runner. He's a rotational runner. Anything happens to one of the guys ahead of him, though, and I think he's ready to have that Achane-sized impact.
Yeah, this guy says, I hope this last one's spicy, and then says Jalen Wright is a top 10 fantasy running back. Yeah, that's spicy, pal. And I get you're not. Nope. We're in the range of where we're not ranking things this way. Like, I don't have Rome Odunze ranked ahead of DJ Moore. Spoiler alert. But yeah, it's just these are bold predictions, people. We actually legally cannot be held accountable for these if they do not happen. That is within the terms of agreement that you signed when you agreed to listen to this podcast. So let that be known. Take it to your lawyer. Whatever. The funny thing about this is that ADP all offseason has sort of said that this is possible, or at least within the range of outcomes if there is chaos in this backfield, because Devon Achane is the 23rd player off the board in consensus ADP. He's a round 2 fantasy pick. He's a top 12 running back. Yet Raheem Mostert is still running back 25. Like we're going to have a role here for Raheem Mostert, even if Achane takes more of a step. I actually think that if these two guys are both healthy all season, I think Mostert probably outkicks running back 25 where he's currently going. But you still have Jalen Wright as a top 50 running back. He's a guy that's going right around the 150th overall pick, which if all three of these guys stay healthy, I don't see how, Jalen Wright's going to be a usable fantasy back. There's an assumption, though, that chaos is going to hit this backfield, and that if chaos hits this backfield, Jalen Wright will benefit, which I totally understand that part of it.
Yeah, that's the argument. And usually when I write about Jalen Wright, I pair him with Blake Corum, and I think it's fundamentally the same argument, where we just saw that team produce like a league-altering, league-tilting running back last year. We just saw that system do it. So it shouldn't be that hard to imagine a really talented rookie runner, especially after Achane did it as a rookie, just stepping into the same situation, many of the same touches, and doing the same thing. As long as you think the player clears the bar in terms of talent and readiness, we know that the situation is rich.
All right, I will go to my second to last one here. And Andy, are you familiar with the meme of Goofy saying "I'll effing do it again" with kind of the eyes? You know what I'm talking about? You know what I'm talking about? He won't make a bold prediction based on Deontay Johnson exceeding expectations again. I'll effing do it again, baby. Deontay Johnson is a wide receiver 1 this season. Yeah. I mean, I think this is spicier than the Rome Odunze prediction, just because people have feelings about Deontay Johnson.
Yes.
And it's Bryce Young, it's the Panthers offense, the worst offense in the NFL last season, an unwatchable, unmitigated disaster last season. Well, guess what? Dave Canales is going to come in here, and I'm not saying he's going to save Bryce Young, but he's going to clean things up. All right, things are going to be a little smoother of an operation, a little more pleasant. Like the vibes are going to be better in Carolina under Dave Canales than they were under Frank Young. Vibes could possibly be worse, so we're saying that. But I think it's going to be a little bit better here under Dave Canales. Most importantly, man, I think we all agree like Deontay Johnson is going to get more targets than a wide receiver that's typically ranked outside the top 30 at the position, or going outside the top 30 at the position where he does go. In Yahoo drafts right now, he's wide receiver 32, 65th overall player. I've sort of heard people say, well, okay, yeah, he's going to have the targets, but does he have the ceiling? Why can't he have the ceiling? Because in my opinion, Deontay Johnson is an excellent football player. He's been one of the best separators in the NFL, period. Certainly in reception perception. He's coming off of all green route tree last year, baby. Light that thing up like a freaking Christmas tree. He's a separator at all 3 levels. He's been great. But even if you want to look at like other separation metrics, he's good in those too. But don't look at that. Only look at mine. I'm being facetious. But seriously, great separator. We know that part of it. He's exactly what Bryce Young needed last year, and he's going to have that guy this year. Mm-hmm. But then you hear about, but the efficiency, the per target efficiency. Hey, haters and losers, he's coming off of his career best yards per target, career best yards per route run. And you want to know why? Because he didn't play in Matt Canada's offense all season, and he didn't have to just line up an X receiver as a sub 6 foot, sub 200 pound player and just run a bunch of goes and curl routes. That's all it took. That's all it took for these efficiency metrics to the efficiency. I mean, give me a freaking break. So let's just say that efficiency from last year is combined with the target totals we know he can get, we know he can earn because of his separation ability, and Bryce Young takes a step from bad to right around league average-ish. I think it's totally possible that Deontay Johnson could be a wide receiver one as the 32nd receiver off the board.
I love that you gave us the voice not once but twice. I love that you directly addressed the haters and losers, of which there are many. That's fantastic. Yeah, I don't think anybody would even argue that Deontay Johnson, if he just stays healthy, is going to see 150 targets. It's going to be a shit ton of targets, right? Like he's absolutely going to finish among the league's target leaders. And at that point, it's really hard for him not to beat his ADP. This is like the ADP is clearly related to team environment.
Sure.
Nobody trusts the Carolina Panthers to put up numbers. Nobody trusts them to put up passing touchdowns. But like, are we really imagining a scenario in which Deontay Johnson sees, I don't know, 160, 165 targets and doesn't score a touchdown, scores 3 touchdowns? I don't know. That seems pretty improbable to me. Great player, and as you say, just a gift to Bryce Young, who not only needed credible receiving threats, but also needs credible receiving threats who are just open off the snap of the football, which is Deontay Johnson. So great fit. We all saw, even in a terrible offensive environment, how useful Adam Thielen was for like half a season last year. Deontay Johnson can at least do that. So this is bold at some level, but when you think about the likely numbers for him in terms of volume and what he's already achieved in his career, it seems very doable.
Yeah, I may or may not have done this prediction, 1, just for my own brand and biases, but 2, because I really thought this would be a great opportunity to do the voice. But all right, with that, let's finish with our final bold predictions. It'd be tough for me to top the acting performance in the aggrieved nature of that last one, but I will try to do my best. But Andy, you give me your final bold prediction, and I hope it's a spicy one.
I thought I needed to have one with just a legitimately, no doubt about it, good player. So here we go. Garrett Wilson wins the receiving Triple Crown. It's a little steamy. I'll grant you that. But man, am I looking forward to a full season. I mean, we don't even need Aaron Rodgers to be vintage MVP level Aaron Rodgers. We just need him to be functional, healthy, late stage, very good quarterback, easing into, his Hall of Fame induction. If he's just, I don't know, if he's a healthier but equal version of the guy that we saw that last season in Green Bay, I think this can happen. And maybe I'm a little bit too enthusiastic right now because I've become a victim of all those clips of Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers in the joint practice against the Giants where they absolutely ended that franchise. That was super impressive. But just a reminder in some ways of, one of the best traits that Aaron Rodgers has had over the years is that when he has somebody on the field with him who he knows is an unsolvable problem at receiver, that is where the ball is going, and he's going to make you find a way to stop it, or he's going to beat you with it, right? I just like quick eyeballing his career as a Packer. There might be more seasons out there, but I found at least a dozen seasons in which an individual receiver finished with double-digit touchdowns, right? And that's so not just Devontae Adams, but Jordy Nelson before him, Greg Jennings, Randall Cobb had one, James Jones had one. Like there's a bunch of them out there. When he's got an easy answer in the offense, that's where the ball goes. And I kind of think it's going to be like that with Garrett Wilson. And Garrett Wilson going over 1,000 yards despite one of the worst quarterback situations in recent memory over the last 2 years was really just heroic stuff. You just give him league average or better quarterback play, and I think a monster season is on the way. Something that possibly puts him inside like the first half of the first round next year.
I've talked about this a lot this offseason, but just because, hey, the season's here and you just brought it up, I'm going to just read this reception perception note about Garrett Wilson off one last time. These are the following receivers to both clear the 95th percentile in success rate versus man coverage and go over 81% success rate versus zone in RP history. Stephon Diggs, Michael Thomas, Odell Beckham, Antonio Brown, Devontae Adams, A.J. Brown, Justin Jefferson, and Garrett Wilson last year. So, yeah, if you're asking yourself, is he pretty good list? If you ask yourself, is he good enough to be, from a talent perspective, win the triple crown winner? 100%. Yes, he is that guy. So I love that prediction. I love that you went with a no doubt about it good player. I did not do that for my final bold prediction. I wanted to go the opposite way with my final bold prediction, which is like, this is just my most F it, why not bold prediction, which is perfectly in the vibe of this player. Will Levis is going to be a QB1 this year.
Hell yeah.
Absolute nonsensical bold prediction. Will Levis is kind of a nonsensical player in the sense that when you watch him, there's a lot of what the hell are you doing nonsensical moments. That's Will Levis as a quarterback. But I think a few things are true. I think, number one, Will Levis's style of play, which I compared to this generation's Jameis Winston to you several months ago, that can lead to fantasy success. Two, I do think that watching the Titans in the preseason, and look, it's preseason football, I get it, but I've become just more and more thought like, man, they're really going to pass the ball, and they're going to involve the running backs to get some layups for Will Levis. That philosophy of the coaching staff, I think, is going to lean into the passing game. That is a potential bonus for Will Levis. The third thing I think is true is that, look, we have spent almost no time discussing Calvin Ridley in the lead up to fantasy season. At least from my perspective, we haven't, which is crazy because we spent way too much time talking about Calvin Ridley about 365 days ago.
Yeah.
But I just think that guy, all of just who he was as a player last year, forget what he was with the Falcons, where he was a much better version with the Falcons. Even the guy he was last year is a huge boost to a young quarterback like Will Levis. And I think the way they're going to use him, some of the deployment you've seen in the preseason, I think just lends itself to a good number one target for Will Levis to get some efficient throws. Certainly no one they had on the roster last year is that style of receiver. So it's going to take kind of an absurd touchdown season for Will Levis and kind of an absurd volume season for Will Levis to get there as a QB1. But like I said, this was certainly my most F it, why not bold prediction.
Every year, there are one or two quarterbacks who sneak into like the top 10, top 12, where like, man, I want to say that Trevor Lawrence might have been the QB 12 last year. And you're like, man, that wasn't even a good year. Yeah. And yet they kind of sneak in a backdoor just by playing all the games. So I think Levis just has that path, right? You can be healthy and pretty functional and make some small strides, and you can still get there if you just play the whole season. Also, huge arm, right? Like, I don't know, weird rookie season because it felt like half of his stats came in the one game, and all of those stats went to DeAndre. And it, just a weird, I was going to say up and down season, but there was like one massive up, and everything else was kind of maybe was flatlined a little bit. The other thing about Levis, though, he's got, I don't want to call it rushing upside in the same way that a lot of the true dual threat guys have rushing upside, but like he had a 9 touchdown season in college. You can imagine a scenario where they're not totally happy with any of their running backs at the goal line, and Will Levis ends up with 4 or 5 touchdowns. Like they get at the 1 yard line and they're just, let's call Will Levis his number, because that worked a little bit in college, and it could happen again. So we might get a little bit of a fluky rushing touchdown total. If they get passing volume to go along with that, you can definitely imagine a scenario where Will Levis, I think, finishes QB8 to QB10.
I love it. Man, this is the time to just say some weird stuff. And I just said some weird stuff. Andy even said some weird stuff and trying to justify this. But, like I said, it's that time of the year. But you know what it is time for? It's time to talk about what's really important in week 1, Andy, because week 1 is just a few days away. And as you know, from the countless live reads, we've got a little thing going on with NBC Sports this year.
Oh, do we?
We do. Because if you sign up for a fantasy league on Yahoo Fantasy, you'll be automatically entered to win $1 million. Even though Andy's on 2 podcast episodes a week this year, he's not clearing $1 million. So, I mean, it's His net worth, that's another discussion because we know he has the private jet, the palatial estates, the whole thing. But still, who couldn't use another $1 million? Everybody. So you'd be automatically entered to win $1 million if you just join a fantasy league. But if any of the players you start score a touchdown in the week 1 games on NBC and Peacock, Will Levis will not be eligible for this, but still a lot of good players are. You'll earn bonus entries into the sweepstakes. Bonus entries equals good. The deadline, people, is September 5th. This is September 3rd. You only have a few more days left. Get your fantasy league going on Yahoo Fantasy. Draft some actually good players that are going to score touchdowns in week 1 and potentially profit. Andy, that is going to do it for us today. Banger of a show. Before we go, though, I got to ask you, Super Bowl prediction. Why not? Let's just say it. Who are you projecting to win the Super Bowl this year?
Oh man, I'm not gonna curse the Bears. I'm not gonna get that.
Yeah, of course. Let's not.
Give me Chiefs over Lions. Give me Chiefs over Lions. The Chiefs offense is not going to be as bad as it was last year, and they're the back-to-back Super Bowl champs. I know history's against us here with them trying for a third straight, but I don't know, until I see somebody knock them off when it really matters. It's hard to predict anything else.
Yeah, I'll go Lions over Chiefs. Jared Goff beats Patrick Mahomes in a Super Bowl. What a stupid prediction to make. There's wow. Literally no way that will happen. We really buried
the boldest prediction on this show, didn't we?
I mean, the Lions should be the NFC favorite, I think, at this point, with everything going on with the 49ers, all that nonsense there. I just feel so good about the Lions right now, even though that division is great. Even though Jordan Love, I think, is an ascending rocket ship of a quarterback, your Bears are looking better than ever. I still feel really good about the Lions. That's my prediction. Jared Goff beats Pat Mahomes in the Super Bowl. That will be the dumbest thing I say all year. So I'm just trying to start myself off with some breathing room here. Say the stupidest thing that I can possibly say here before week 1 even gets going, so I have some leash the rest of the year. And on that note, mercifully, this podcast is over. That's going to do it for this one. Tomorrow, though, Sal Vetri joins me as we debut Data Dump Wednesday. Could not be more excited about that. We identify the stats you need to know heading into week 1. Until then, we're out.